Yeah, well, there's 5 trends that were identified by the Consumer Goods Forum, which is an international group of retailers and vendors to retailers. And each year they define the 5 industry trends that are going to be affecting their business. So for 2011, the top concern is the economy and consumer demand, which is no big surprise given that we're just coming out of a recession and potentially going back into one, depending on who you talk to. The second one is corporate responsibility, which is everything tied into the environment and sustainability of the land and the products that the retailers are selling and putting out in the marketplace. The third piece is the retail brand offer. So retailers in the past were where you went to buy brands. You go to buy your Tide or your Tropicana orange juice at a grocery store. Today, the retailers are really focused on building their own brand. So the Loblaws brand above the door or the Safeway brand above the door. And then as well, the private label brands that sit on the shelf and compete with the national brands. So a little bit in that area. The fourth one is the competitive landscape. Retailing is an ultra-competitive industry. There's low margins, very high cash flow. It's a big business, but it's very easy to lose a lot of money in retailing if things go slightly sideways. So that was a big issue. And the last one that we'll touch on is food and product safety, which is very relevant to the agriculture community. And it's a real concern for the retailers, not so much because it hurts their brand, but it's a big liability. You know, when Maple Leaf has a recall on their products, it costs the retailers a lot of money to conduct that recall and also in lost sales. Okay. Yeah, well, for me, I think we kind of go through those in its own direction. In terms of how the industry could react to the economy and consumer demand, I think it really links back to prices. When you look at the price of beef in particular, which is growing at plus 9% year on year, according to Statistics Canada, that compares to about 4% of the total basket of goods that a consumer buys at a grocery store. So beef has a little bit of runaway inflation, and some people in the beef industry might be saying, hey, that's great, we're getting more per pound. But in reality, when prices go up, what we're not seeing is the sales result change. So in fact, there was a survey of grocers by Progressive Grocer magazine, and meat was the biggest category that was being hit by commodity cost increases. So great on the price side, but it really affects demand. And in the end, the producers end up with less in their pocket because they're selling less. And that creates a glut in the marketplace in terms of inventory and all that sort of stuff. So I think one is trying to focus on building prices, not by just passing along commodity cost increases, but by actually adding innovation to the products. Don't just sell me a steak that's marinated and has vegetables in the same package. I don't know how, there's some really way out there ideas, but think beyond just the commodity cost passing it along. Try to add value to your products as they develop. And that's really the key message around economy and consumer demand is trying to drive demand so that the consumer is willing to pay money, but also get something back for it in addition. Well, I think it's interesting. I think depending on who you talk to, I was sort of noodling this around in my head in the last couple of days, who makes more money in the trade. I think that sort of indicates who has more power. And when you look at retailers, meat is a pretty profitable category. It's the reason why it's on the exterior of the store versus buried in the middle of the store where no one goes. So I think the retailer does have a significant amount of power. I think the retailing power is increasing because there's a lot of consolidation and global players are becoming much bigger. I think that consumers look to the retailers to provide them with the products that are best for them in a lot of ways. So there's a lot of consumer trust there. So it's interesting in Alberta, for instance, you can buy New Zealand beef or pork ribs from Finland, or it doesn't make a lot of sense logically, but because the retailer power is there, the negotiation is, okay, Alberta producers, in order to do a front page $2.99 a pound ad, we need this price. Are you willing to supply us or able to supply us? And if the answer back from the processor community is we can't sell you it at that price, the retailer says, okay, I'll go out onto the international markets and buy it. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. I think the power rests in the retailer, to be honest. At least the big retailers, the Loblaws, the Sobeys, the Metros, now Walmart with their food production, because they're really have the economies of scale that are needed in order to have that negotiation with the Cargills of the world that are providing these products to them. Well, yeah, I think it's interesting, when you talk about, when a retailer like Safeway or a superstore runs a front page ad on, pork tenderloin, people eat pork tenderloin. They're actually affecting what people are eating on their plate because it's on sale. If it wasn't on sale, I might not be eating pork tenderloin tonight, but because it was on sale, I might be eating it 3 out of the next 7 nights. So the sustainability factor, I think, needs to be more balanced in terms of how the producers, and especially Canadian producers, brand their product and create demand for their product. I think there's been a little bit of rolling over of the industry of saying, okay, well, Canada or Alberta or whatever jurisdiction you're talking about, beef, pork, chicken, whatever it may be, we can't really get our act together to promote ourselves. You need to be tied. Alberta beef needs to be the tide of beef, hands down. And people pay $2, $3, $4 more a box to buy Tide, and Tide has a 50% market share. Why? Because they market. And Tide also has a great negotiating power with Loblaws or any other retailer because they've got 50% of the market. So I think there's a responsibility. Retailers are not going to give it up. The industry has to create value for themselves by promoting the brand, building a brand, getting consumers to understand what that brand stands for, and driving demand so the market share goes up. And people say, I don't want New Zealand beef, I want Alberta beef at my grocery store in Calgary. It would make sense. I think it's the initial steps. I think one of the challenges we have in Canada is these provincial jurisdictions, quite frankly, that they're silos. We're just getting rid of the wheat board, but there's all of these barriers in place to building a brand. The reason why Tide is a big brand is that it's the same brand, it's the same product, it's marketed the same way in Halifax as it is in Vancouver, as it is in Calgary. And once you get provincial jurisdictions and barriers going up, and how does product flow back and forth across an invisible line between Saskatchewan and Alberta, let alone over the border, you completely shoot yourself in the foot in terms of execution. So if the industry is really going to go in that direction, you need to say, okay, we're not going to be protective of our own individual interests, and we're going to create more value for everybody by working together. And today I still see the industry working more in their protective silos.
So let's do a quick recap of those 5 trends.
Yeah, well, again, we talked a lot about economy and consumer demand and how that focuses, but the second piece is corporate responsibility. I think there's a lot in the press. Retailers are very concerned about the environment in particular. Walmart, is out there, of all people, Walmart's out there pushing the environment quite strongly. But I think, the industry doesn't necessarily lead in terms of corporate responsibility and putting that image out there. If you were to look in the protein area, who leads in corporate responsibility is probably the fisheries industry, the seafood industry, with their certification standards, third-party certification, where people can actually rely on one common standard across the whole industry, which is really important. The third issue was the retail brand offer. I think more and more we can't adapt a one-size-fits-all program. The meat section of a store, to be quite honest, is boring. It looks like an industrial warehouse more so than, think of the beauty section of a store versus the meat section. It's 2 different worlds. So I think, the industry needs to think less like a commodity, more like a branded product, create excitement, get engaged, help the retailer build their brand, and know what each retailer stands for, because Real Canadian Superstore is a very different brand than Calgary Co-op, and how you execute programs in those 2 environments needs to be completely different. The fourth issue is the competitive landscape. The Western market, if we look at it in particular, Walmart's here now. Walmart's gaining share in the marketplace. It's going to continue to gain market share. They built a huge warehouse in Balzac to do that. And you look at other retailers. Save-On Foods is doing quite well in the marketplace. And I think in the near future, you'll probably see Save-On coming into the Calgary market. I'm pretty sure you're going to see Whole Foods from the US, an organic and natural retailer, coming into Calgary. And there's always the threat of the hard discounters, which are a big European phenomenon. Aldi and Lidl, they have 20-25% market share depending on the country in Europe. They have 1,100 stores in the US. Western Canada is a prime target for them for development. Small stores, I just need a small piece of land, I open it up, and I can do really high volumes out of a small store. So lots of change coming in the retail space. And then on food and product safety, I think the industry really needs to step up a notch, and it goes back again to industry coordination and partnerships. I think it's a bit of a shame that when you look at food handling instructions, they're on the back of the package in 4 font. They're very hard to read. I've already picked up the package by the time, there's a lot of issues there, and there's a lot of room for education. If the industry worked together, not just within beef, which is one challenge, but then also partnering with pork and chicken and lamb and all the other components, to build a food safety program where in the store, when I pick up a package of beef, there's great indications on what I need to do to get the product home safely. When I talk to the person behind the meat counter, they give me a food safety snippet. When I go to the cashier, they're double bagging it and reminding me that that I need to get it back into the fridge in the next 45 minutes. And then, the person that's putting it in the bag, at the end of the Safeway line, maybe they're putting a sticker on the bag that's been used so that I'm not reusing that plastic bag to pack my kid's lunch tomorrow. It's simple things, but it could save a life. So I think industry coordination is a nice thing to talk about, but in food and product safety, it's a real life and death issue in a lot of cases. So, those are the big 5. We talked a lot about economy, but I think all 5 of those issues really are applicable to our industry in the beef industry in Western Canada.